The story begins at the end. The North Bridge office tower was full of shouting, ringing phones, and red flashing screens. The company was on fire, not with flames, but with panic. Clients were screaming. Money was disappearing. The payment system that once handled millions every day had stopped completely. And in the middle of it all stood Evan Grant, the CEO. His face was pale, his hands shook, and sweat rolled down his forehead. He looked around at his staff, engineers and managers, all working desperately, none of them able to fix what had broken. He had fired one man only days ago, a man he thought was weak, unimportant, replaceable. But that man had been the backbone of the entire company. His name was Marcus Reyes. And now the company Evan built was falling apart without him. This was the climax, the moment of collapse. But the story did not start here. To understand how everything ended in disaster, we need to go back. Marcus was not the type of man most people noticed. He was quiet, calm, and steady. He did not fight for attention in meetings. He did not play politics. He was simply there, always working, always fixing problems others didn't even understand. For 10 years, Marcus was the invisible glue of North Bridge Technologies. He managed the company's systems, payments, and vendor contracts. While others enjoyed the spotlight, Marcus stayed in the background. He never bragged about his work. But when something went wrong, he was the one people called at midnight, on weekends, during holidays. He missed birthdays, he missed dinners, but he always showed up for the company. He kept things running so smoothly that executives thought the systems were indestructible. And that was the problem. When people do their job too well, others begin to think the job is easy. They begin to believe anyone can do it. That's what Evan Grant thought. Evan was a loud CEO, full of energy, full of pride. He loved being seen as the man in control. He loved interviews, speeches, and the sound of his own voice. He hated the idea that anyone else might be more important than him. To him, Marcus was just a quiet worker, someone who could be replaced with a cheaper option. One Friday morning, Evan called Marcus into his office. The blinds were half closed, the room full of shadows. Evan didn't even look him in the eye. He slid a paper across the desk and said, "We're moving in a new direction. Your role has been cut." Marcus stared at the letter. 10 years of loyalty, gone in a single sentence. "Sir," Marcus said calmly, "the Helios Pay renewal is due next week. If it isn't handled carefully, the entire payment system will—" Evan waved his hand. "Someone else will take care of it. Don't worry." Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to say that the renewal wasn't just paperwork, that it required credentials only he had and relationships only he had built. But he knew it wouldn't matter. Evan had already decided. Marcus picked up the small box of his belongings. He walked past coworkers, some of whom looked away in silence, others who gave him small nods of respect. He left the building quietly. Upstairs, Evan raised a glass of champagne with his managers. "One less salary to pay," he laughed. "The company will thank me." That weekend, the office was silent. Screens glowed with steady numbers. Customers continued booking, paying, and working. To everyone else, nothing seemed wrong. But Marcus, sitting at home, knew what was coming. He had warned them. He had told them about the Helios Pay renewal. Without it, every single payment Northbridge processed would stop. And once it stopped, the clients would leave, the investors would leave. The company would bleed to death in hours. He wrote a note in his notebook. Helios Pay. Grace period ends Sunday midnight. Then he closed the book. It wasn't his problem anymore. He had been fired. He told himself to let it go. But his gut twisted. He knew what was going to happen. Sunday night arrived. At 11:59 p.m., the Helios Pay account still wasn't renewed. At 12 o'clock, the system locked. At 12:01, the payment artery that carried millions of dollars a day shut down. Customers in New York, London, and Singapore all saw the same error. Transaction failed. Airlines couldn't book tickets. Banks couldn't move money. Stores couldn't complete sales. The error messages went to the company inbox, but that inbox belonged to Marcus, and Marcus was gone. The messages sat unread, like screams in an empty room. At home, Marcus's phone buzzed. A message from Nina, a QA engineer. Payments are failing. Test accounts can't process. Do you know what's wrong? Marcus looked at the message. He thought about replying. He typed Helios Pay renewal, but deleted it. Finally, he wrote only document everything, because he knew it was too late. By Monday morning, Northbridge was on fire. Employees ran through the office with panic in their eyes. Phones rang non-stop. Clients screamed. And Evan Grant, the man who thought he was in control, was about to face the truth. The man he had fired, the quiet, invisible man he thought was replaceable, was the only one who could save them. And without him, the company would fall. By 9:30 on Monday morning, the whole company was in chaos. Screens that were always green were now red. Payments failed everywhere. Customers were angry, calling non-stop. Support workers cried at their desks as people shouted at them on the phone. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody could fix it. Evan Grant, the CEO, walked into the operations floor shouting like a man who had lost control. Restart the servers, roll everything back, switch to the backup. But nothing worked. Every error came back with the same cold message: access denied, contact account owner. By 10:15, the first big client called Evan directly. It was the CEO of Orion Airlines. He yelled into the phone, "Our customers can't buy tickets. We're losing millions by the hour. What are you people doing?" Evan tried to make excuses, calling it a small issue, but his voice shook. The airline CEO hung up, furious. By 11 o'clock, more big clients called. Some threatened to sue. Some said they would leave Northbridge for good. For years, Northbridge had promised that payments would always work, and now the promise was broken in one morning. The board of directors arrived at the office by noon. They were supposed to be at a meeting in Chicago, but they canceled everything when they heard the news. They stormed into the conference room, faces hard with anger. "Explain this," said Priya Sharma, the chief financial officer. She was usually calm, but her voice was sharp and cold. Evan swallowed. "It's just a vendor problem. A contract didn't renew. We're fixing it." "Which vendor?" Priya asked. "Helios Pay," Evan said quietly. The board members froze. Everyone knew Helios Pay wasn't just a vendor. It was the heart of the company. Every payment flowed through it. Without it, the company was dead. "Why wasn't it renewed?" another board member shouted. "It was an oversight," Evan said weakly. "Whose oversight?" someone else demanded. Evan's throat went dry. He couldn't lie his way out. Finally, he admitted, "Marcus Reyes handled that account. We let him go last week." The room exploded. Chairs moved, people shouted, fists hit the table. "You fired him? Without a handover? Are you insane?" Evan tried to defend himself. "He wasn't essential." Not essential? Priya's voice rose louder than anyone had ever heard. Marcus was the backbone of this company. He kept everything running, and you erased him like trash? The truth was clear. Evan had made the biggest mistake of his life. By early afternoon, things got worse. Clients sent letters. Investors pulled out. The company's stock price started to crash. Reporters were calling, asking for answers. The company was bleeding from every side. Finally, Priya said the only words that made sense. "We need Marcus back." They tried calling him. At first, Marcus didn't answer. His silence felt louder than shouting. But after a few tries, he finally picked up. "Marcus," Priya said, her voice softer now. "We need you. The Helios Pay account is locked. Payments have stopped everywhere. Our clients are furious. Investors are leaving. The company, it won't last another day. Please, we need your help." Marcus didn't answer right away. He listened. He let her explain how bad it was. He let her admit the truth they had ignored. When she was done, he finally spoke, calm and steady. "I warned him," Marcus said simply. "I know," Priya replied quickly. "You warned us, and we didn't listen. But please, we are out of time. You're the only one who can fix this." Marcus stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "If I come back, it will be on my terms." "What terms?" Priya asked. "I want protections for the team, the engineers, the QA staff, the quiet workers who never get respect. They need fair pay, bonuses, and proper treatment. I want the company to change its culture. No more ignoring the people who actually do the work. And I want the truth made public. Everyone must know this company almost died because it ignored the invisible ones." Priya didn't hesitate. "Yes, you'll have it, all of it. Just please help us survive." Marcus said slowly, "I'll come in tomorrow morning. You'll have your system back by noon." He ended the call. His partner asked what happened. Marcus said only, "They finally realized who I am." Back at Northbridge, the board tore into Evan. "You caused this. You fired the wrong man. You ignored his warnings, and now we're at his mercy." Evan tried to push back, but no one cared. They stripped him of power on the spot. Priya was put in charge of the company until the crisis ended. Evan sat in silence, his face pale, knowing his career was over. That night, Marcus sat at home feeling calmer than he had in years. He wasn't happy about their collapse. He wasn't cruel. But for once, the balance had shifted. It wasn't the loud, flashy boss who held the power. It was the quiet worker, the one they fired without thanks, the one they needed more than anyone. And Marcus knew that tomorrow, when he walked back into that office, he would no longer be invisible. Tuesday morning came, and for the first time in years, Marcus walked back into the Northbridge office. The air was thick with shame. People whispered as he passed. Some looked at him with guilt, others with hope. Everyone knew this man was their last chance. The board of directors waited in the big conference room. Evan was there too, sitting in silence, his face gray and his jaw tight. For once, he had no clever words. Marcus walked in calmly. He wore no suit, no tie, just a simple shirt and jacket. But the room shifted when he entered. For the first time, the invisible man was seen. Priya, the CFO, stood. "Marcus," she said softly, "thank you for coming. We need you to restore Helios Pay." Marcus looked around the table. He saw fear in their eyes. He saw the weight of millions slipping away every hour. And he remembered the day he carried his box of belongings out the door, treated like trash. "I'll help," Marcus said. His voice was steady. "But only if the promises we agreed to yesterday are written down today. Raises for the engineers, respect for the workers, and a public statement about what happened." The board nodded quickly. They would have signed anything. Their survival depended on him. Marcus turned his eyes toward Evan. "And him," Marcus said. "He has to go." The room froze. Evan's head shot up. "What? You can't!" But the board didn't argue. They had already decided. Evan was the reason Marcus was gone. Evan was the reason the company almost collapsed. Priya looked at him coldly. "You're finished, Evan. Effective today." Evan slammed his fist on the table. "You can't fire me. This is my company." "No," Marcus said calmly. "It's the people's company, and you forgot that." Security came minutes later to escort Evan out. He shouted the whole way down the hall, his voice echoing like a man watching his empire crumble. Employees stopped and stared. Some even clapped. Marcus didn't smile. He wasn't here for revenge smiles. He was here to fix what was broken. Marcus sat down at a terminal in the operations center. Dozens of engineers watched him, their faces tense. The system was a mess, but Marcus moved with calm focus. He opened secure keys, reconnected networks, and renewed credentials that only he had access to. By 10 a.m., the first payment cleared. By 11, hundreds flowed. By noon, millions moved again. The company was alive. When the success messages lit up on screens, the whole room cheered. Some cried with relief. For them, it was survival. For Marcus, it was proof. Proof that one man, treated as invisible, had been holding the entire empire together. That afternoon, the board called a press conference. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward, ready for blood. Priya stood at the podium. Her voice was clear. This company suffered a major failure. The cause was simple. We underestimated one of our most valuable people. We let him go without listening to his warnings, and the result nearly destroyed us. The room buzzed with shock. CEOs never admitted fault. Companies never told the full truth. But here it was. Priya gestured toward Marcus, who stood at the side of the stage. "This is Marcus Reyes. He saved us. And from today forward, this company will never again ignore the people who keep it alive." Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras zoomed in. For years, Marcus had been invisible. Now, his name was everywhere. Evan, watching from home, screamed at the screen. He threw a glass against the wall. "That was supposed to be me!" he shouted. But nobody was listening anymore. He was done. By the end of the week, Evan's name was on the news. Not as a visionary leader, but as the arrogant boss who fired the wrong man. Headlines called him reckless, careless, blind. His reputation was ruined. No company would hire him again. Meanwhile, Marcus didn't chase glory. He stayed quiet, as always. But this time, he wasn't invisible. His team got the raises. Engineers were thanked publicly. Meetings changed. Workers were heard. And Marcus? He finally took a week off. He sat with his partner on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. He didn't need revenge in the loud, angry sense. The revenge was already done. Evan had fired the wrong man. And the very next day, the company collapsed, until the quiet man they had erased came back and reminded them who really held the power. The news spread fast. By Wednesday morning, every business site, every tech blog, every finance show was telling the same story. Northbridge saved by fired employee. CEO ousted after costly mistake. Invisible worker becomes company hero. Marcus's face, once hidden in the shadows, was now on headlines around the world. But while Marcus gained respect, Evan lost everything. Evan tried to call old contacts. He called investors, partners, even journalists he once bragged to. But no one answered. No one wanted to be connected to him anymore. His LinkedIn messages went unanswered. His phone stopped ringing. He used to be invited to every big dinner, every event, every speech. Now, his calendar was empty. By Thursday, the board released an official statement. Evan Grant is no longer with Northbridge Technologies. We thank him for his past service. That single line cut deeper than any knife. Past service. 10 years of bragging and strutting reduced to 2 cold words. Evan shouted in his apartment. He told himself he'd start another company. He told himself he'd rise again. But deep down, he knew the truth. No investor would ever trust him again. Meanwhile, Marcus didn't chase glory. He stayed quiet, as always. But this time, he wasn't invisible. His team got the raises. Engineers were thanked publicly. Meetings changed. Workers were heard. And Marcus? He finally took a week off. He sat with his partner on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise. For the first time in years, he didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. He didn't need revenge in the loud, angry sense. The revenge was already done. Evan had fired the wrong man. And the very next day, the company collapsed, until the quiet man they had erased came back and reminded them who really held the power. The news spread fast. By Wednesday morning, every business site, every tech blog, every finance show was telling the same story. Northbridge saved by fired employee. CEO ousted after costly mistake. Invisible worker becomes company hero. Marcus's face, once hidden in the shadows, was now on headlines around the world. But while Marcus gained respect, Evan lost everything. Evan tried to call old contacts. He called investors, partners, even journalists he once bragged to. But no one answered. No one wanted to be connected to him anymore. His LinkedIn messages went unanswered. His phone stopped ringing. He used to be invited to every big dinner, every event, every speech. Now, his calendar was empty. By Thursday, the board released an official statement. Evan Grant is no longer with Northbridge Technologies. We thank him for his past service. That single line cut deeper than any knife. Past service. 10 years of bragging and strutting reduced to 2 cold words. Evan shouted in his apartment. He told himself he'd start another company. He told himself he'd rise again. But deep down, he knew the truth. No investor would ever trust him again. Meanwhile, Marcus returned to the office, not as a ghost in the background, but as the person everyone respected. People stopped him in the hallway to thank him. Engineers asked for his advice openly. Even managers who once ignored him now listened closely. Priya invited Marcus to sit at the board table, not as a CEO, not as a politician, but as the man who knew how things really worked. "You belong here," she told him. Marcus shook his head. "I don't need titles," he said. "I just want the people doing the work to be treated fairly." Priya smiled. "Then that's exactly what you'll help us do." At home, Marcus finally had time for himself. He cooked dinner with his partner. He read books he had left untouched for years. He called his parents more often. He remembered the nights when Evan called him at midnight, demanding fixes. He remembered working on Christmas, on birthdays, while others celebrated. He remembered how invisible he felt. And now he felt the balance return. His revenge wasn't about destroying Evan. It was about proving that the quiet ones matter. That power doesn't always live in the spotlight. Sometimes it lives in the shadows. But Evan's fall wasn't done yet. A week later, lawsuits began. Clients who lost millions during the outage wanted answers. Lawyers pointed directly at Evan's decision to fire Marcus. He had no defense. His arrogance was written in emails, in meeting notes, in the silence of everyone he ignored. By the end of the month, Evan was drowning in debt. His mansion went up for sale. His sports car was repossessed. The man who once laughed with champagne in his hand now sat alone in a half-empty apartment, scrolling through news articles that called him the CEO who fired the wrong man. One rainy evening, Evan walked past the North Bridge Tower. He stopped on the sidewalk, looking up at the glowing windows. Inside, people worked calmly, the company alive again. Through the glass, he spotted Marcus walking down the hall with Priya, both smiling, talking like equals. The sight hit him like a punch to the chest. That was supposed to be him, the leader, the hero, the man everyone needed. But no, he had thrown it away. He had believed Marcus was nothing. And now, Marcus stood where Evan used to stand. Respected, trusted, seen. Evan turned and walked away, the rain mixing with tears on his face. Back inside, Marcus paused at the window. For a brief second, he thought he saw someone standing outside, a shadow of a man. But when he looked closer, the sidewalk was empty. The company survived. The workers thrived. The culture changed. And Evan? He faded into silence, a lesson told in whispers. Never fire the man who keeps the heart beating. Never ignore the quiet ones. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need shouting. Sometimes revenge is simply letting the truth play out. Evan fired the wrong employee, and the very next day, his company collapsed. Evan didn't give up right away. His pride was too strong. 2 weeks after being fired, he sat in a cafe with a notebook, scribbling ideas for a new company. Evan Grant Enterprises, he whispered to himself. He imagined investors lining up, eager to back him again. He imagined walking on stage at a tech conference, proving everyone wrong. But reality didn't care about his dreams. When he sent his pitch deck to investors, nobody replied. The ones who did respond sent cold, short messages. "We're not interested at this time." Word had spread. Everyone knew he was reckless. Everyone knew he had destroyed a billion-dollar system because he thought he was smarter than everyone else. Evan slammed his laptop shut in anger. For the first time, he felt what Marcus had felt: ignored, dismissed, invisible. At the same time, Marcus was finally free from that weight. The board asked him to stay on as a consultant, and he agreed, but only part-time. He wanted his life back. He wanted balance. He spent mornings walking his dog through the park. He cooked dinner without rushing to answer emails. He laughed more. His partner told him, "You're finally you again." But Marcus didn't stop caring about the company. He taught younger engineers the systems he had once guarded alone. He shared his knowledge instead of hiding it. He made sure no single person would ever be as invisible and overworked as he had been. He wasn't just fixing code anymore, he was fixing culture. Meanwhile, Evan tried one last move. He reached out to a rival company of Northbridge, hoping they'd hire him out of spite. He pitched himself as a leader who knew Northbridge's secrets. He even offered to work for half his old salary. But the rival CEO laughed in his face. Why would we hire the man who almost destroyed his own company? If you couldn't respect the people who built your empire, why should we believe you'd respect ours? Evan left that meeting humiliated. He sat in his car for an hour, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. The truth finally sank in. He wasn't feared, respected, or wanted anymore. He was finished. One evening, Marcus walked into a small family restaurant with a few coworkers. They had just finished a long day of cleaning up old systems. The group laughed, relaxed, and for once, Marcus wasn't the quiet one. At a corner table, alone, sat Evan. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes tired. He looked smaller than Marcus remembered, like a balloon that had lost all its air. For a moment, their eyes met. Time froze. Evan opened his mouth, maybe to say something, maybe to apologize, but no words came. He looked down at his drink instead. Marcus didn't walk over. He didn't need to. He had already won. Weeks turned into months. Northbridge slowly regained the trust of its clients. It wasn't easy, but with Marcus guiding the team, the systems became stronger than ever. Engineers who had once thought about quitting now stayed, because for the first time, they felt valued. New hires came in, inspired by the story of the quiet man who saved the company. And Marcus? He became a legend, not for being flashy, but for proving that real strength is often silent. As for Evan, his life grew smaller each day. He sold his apartment to cover legal fees. He took a consulting job far below his old rank, but even that didn't last. Once they Googled his name, they let him go. The man who once barked orders in a glass tower now took trains instead of private cars, ate at diners instead of five-star restaurants, and lived in a one-bedroom rental on the edge of the city. No one clapped when he entered a room. No one cared what he had to say. His fall was complete. 1 year later, Marcus stood at a podium at a tech conference. Thousands listened quietly as he spoke, not about himself, but about the lesson he had lived. "Never underestimate the people who keep things running," he said. "Never think someone is replaceable just because they don't seek the spotlight. Respect your teams, because if you don't..." He paused, letting the silence grow. "One wrong decision can destroy everything you've built." The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus smiled, not for himself, but for the truth that could save others from the same fate. Outside the conference hall, Evan watched from a distance. He hadn't been invited, but he stood by the doors, listening to the cheers. His chest ached with bitterness, but also with regret. He had fired the wrong man, and the world would never let him forget it. He walked away quietly, disappearing into the crowd. Marcus stepped down from the stage, greeted by his team. He shook their hands, laughed with them, and felt the warmth of being respected, not used. For the first time, he felt peace. Because revenge wasn't always about shouting or fighting. Sometimes revenge was letting life itself show the truth. Evan had taken his dignity. Evan had tried to erase him. But Marcus came back stronger. And Evan? He became the ghost of his own arrogance. Northbridge became a healthier place. Engineers took time off without fear. Weekends were respected. The culture changed from fear to balance. Marcus looked around sometimes and thought, this is how it should have always been. He wasn't a CEO, but his influence was bigger than any title. His quiet leadership shaped the company's future in ways Evan never could. And yet, Marcus never forgot the pain of being invisible. That memory kept him kind. It kept him patient with others who felt small. One Saturday morning, Marcus visited his old neighborhood. The same small streets where he grew up, the same corner store, the same worn sidewalks. Kids played soccer in the street, laughing. One boy ran up to Marcus and said, "Hey, are you the guy from the news? The one who saved that company?" Marcus chuckled. "Yeah, I guess that's me." The boy's eyes lit up. "Cool, I want to be like you one day." Marcus knelt down. "Then remember this," he said gently. "Don't let anyone tell you that you don't matter. Even if they don't see you, your work has value. Never forget that." The boy nodded, grinning, before running back to his friends. Marcus stood up, smiling softly. That was enough. Not fame, not money, not revenge. Just knowing he had made a difference. Meanwhile, Evan drifted further into silence. His name became a joke in business circles. People used him as a warning. Don't pull an Evan Grant. He tried to fight it, tried to rebuild his image, but it was no use. The world had moved on, and he was stuck in the past. His pride, once his greatest weapon, had become his prison. He lived quietly now, bitter and forgotten, a man haunted by the decision that ended it all, firing the wrong employee. 1 year later, Marcus was invited to a big award ceremony. Leaders, innovators, and engineers filled the hall. Marcus wasn't used to such events, but he agreed to attend. When his name was called, the whole room stood and clapped. He walked to the stage, nervous but calm. The lights were bright, the applause loud. "Thank you," Marcus said, holding the award. "But this isn't just about me. It's about every person who has ever been ignored, overlooked, or dismissed. This award belongs to them, to the invisible ones. Because the truth is, none of us are invisible. We all matter." The crowd roared with applause. Some people even wiped away tears. In that moment, Marcus's story was no longer just his. It belonged to everyone who had ever been underestimated. After the ceremony, Marcus went outside into the night air. The city lights glowed, and for the first time in years, he let himself breathe fully. He thought about that Friday afternoon when Evan had fired him. He thought about carrying that cardboard box down the elevator, feeling small, feeling erased. And now? Now he stood taller than ever, not because of revenge, but because the truth had come out. Evan had tried to erase him, but Marcus had written himself into history. At a small diner across the city, Evan sat alone, eating quietly. The TV above the counter showed Marcus's speech. Evan looked up, watching the man he once dismissed now celebrated as a symbol of resilience and justice. He set down his fork and whispered to himself, "That should have been me." But deep down he knew it never could have been. He never had Marcus's heart, his patience, or his quiet strength. The difference between them was clear. Evan wanted power for himself. Marcus used power to lift others. And that was why Evan had fallen and Marcus had risen. As Marcus walked home that night, he thought about everything that had happened. The firing, the collapse, the return, the revenge. It all felt like a lifetime ago. And yet, one truth echoed in his mind. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Because sometimes the quiet ones are the strongest of all. The story closed not with Evan's anger, not with Marcus's bitterness, but with a simple truth. Evan fired the wrong employee. The next day, his company collapsed. And from the ruins, Marcus finally stood where he always belonged. Seen, respected, and never invisible again. Life at Northbridge moved forward, but Marcus never forgot the weight of the past. One morning, as he walked into the office, he noticed a young engineer sitting alone in the corner, staring at her computer with a worried face. Marcus stopped. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. The young woman, named Leela, looked up nervously. I don't think I belong here. I keep making small mistakes. Maybe I'm not good enough." Marcus sat down beside her. "I used to think that too," he said. "For years, I thought no one saw me. Every mistake felt bigger than it was. But let me tell you something. Your work matters. You matter. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Leela's eyes softened. "Really?" Marcus nodded. "You're not invisible here. Not anymore." From that day, Leela grew more confident. She became one of the brightest engineers on the team, and she never forgot Marcus's words. While Marcus was lifting others, Evan was falling into deeper shadows. He tried to attend networking events, but people avoided him. Old colleagues turned away. Some even whispered behind his back. That's Evan Grant, the man who destroyed his own company. One night, after another rejection, Evan walked home through the empty streets. He stopped by a newspaper stand. The front page showed Marcus again, smiling, standing with the board, celebrating a new product launch. Evan's hand shook as he picked up the paper. His own name was nowhere. "Erased," he muttered bitterly. "I've been erased." He dropped the paper and walked on, his shoulders slumped. Back at Northbridge, Marcus was asked to mentor a group of interns. He hesitated at first, unsure if he wanted the responsibility. But he remembered his own past, the nights he wished someone had guided him. So he agreed. On the first day, he stood in front of the group and said, "I'm not here to impress you with big speeches. I'm here to listen. If you feel ignored, if you feel small, come talk to me. No one should feel invisible." The interns looked surprised. No leader had ever spoken to them like that. Weeks later, one of them told Marcus, "You've changed how I see myself. I thought I was just a replaceable worker, but now I know I can make a difference." Marcus smiled quietly. That was his real revenge, not just on Evan, but on a system that had treated people like tools. He was changing it, one voice at a time. Evan, meanwhile, faced his final breaking point. He was called to court to answer for the lawsuits. His lawyer told him, "There's no way out. You'll be paying for this mistake for years." Evan sat in silence. He thought of the nights he laughed at Marcus, the times he dismissed his warnings, the day he threw him out like trash. And now, here he was, alone, bankrupt, forgotten. For the first time, Evan whispered words he had never said before. "I was wrong." But no one was there to hear him. One late evening, Marcus returned home after a long day. He stood on his balcony, looking at the city lights. His partner walked out and said, "Do you ever think about Evan?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes, but not with anger anymore. He made his choice, and his choice destroyed him. That's enough." His partner smiled softly. then maybe that's the real revenge, not what you did to him, but what he did to himself." Marcus nodded. "Yes, he fired me, but in the end, he fired himself." They stood together under the night sky, peaceful at last. As the months passed, Marcus's legend grew. Students studied his story in universities. Workers told it in break rooms. Leaders quoted his words in speeches. It became more than just a business tale. It became a symbol of respect, humility, and justice. People repeated it in simple form, like a warning, like a proverb. Don't fire the wrong person. Don't ignore the quiet ones. Every wrong has its revenge. And Evan? He faded completely. His name disappeared from articles. His face disappeared from magazines. He became a man walking in the background, unnoticed. One day, he sat on a park bench as two young men nearby talked. "Did you hear that story about the boss who fired the wrong guy?" "Yeah," the other laughed. "Classic. The company collapsed the next day. Karma, man, pure karma." Evan closed his eyes. They didn't even remember his name anymore. He was just the boss, the nameless villain of a story everyone else celebrated. Marcus, on the other hand, carried himself with calm strength. He didn't chase revenge anymore because he had already won. His victory wasn't Evan's fall. His victory was knowing he had finally been seen, respected, and valued. That was the sweetest revenge of all. Evan fired the wrong employee. The next day, his company collapsed. But Marcus rose higher than he ever dreamed, while Evan sank lower than he ever feared. And so the story ends, not with anger, but with justice. Because every wrong has its revenge. The story of Evan and Marcus didn't end in offices or boardrooms. It became something larger, almost like a legend whispered in hallways. And Marcus, years later, walked through the same building where it all began. The glass doors, the tall elevators, the smell of coffee. It all felt familiar, but lighter now. He stopped near the lobby and looked at the security desk. The guard smiled at him warmly. "Good morning, Mr. Marcus." He smiled back. For years, he had walked through these doors unseen. Now, even the smallest gesture reminded him that he mattered. It wasn't about fame anymore. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about finally being seen. One evening, as Marcus spoke at a university lecture, a student raised her hand. "Mr. Marcus," she asked, "do you ever think revenge was the wrong word? Because it seems like you didn't fight back. You just lived your truth." Marcus thought carefully. Then he said, "Revenge doesn't always mean shouting or hitting back. Sometimes the best revenge is letting the truth show itself. I didn't destroy Evan. He destroyed himself. All I did was survive. All I did was keep going." The room fell silent, and then applause filled the hall. Marcus had turned pain into wisdom. That was his greatest power. And Evan? No one remembered him anymore. No students studied him. No leaders quoted him. His story ended not with fire, but with silence. He became the shadow in Marcus's light, a warning, a whisper, nothing more. The man who had once shouted in boardrooms now walked through life unheard. Years later, Marcus retired. He moved to a small house by the coast, where mornings began with waves crashing and evenings ended with sunsets painting the sky. He didn't need noise anymore. He didn't need applause. He had already won his battle. not just against Evan, but against invisibility. On quiet nights, he sat on his porch, a cup of tea in his hand, listening to the wind. Sometimes he thought of Evan, not with anger, not even with pity, just with a calm acceptance. Evan had been a storm, but storms pass. Marcus had been steady ground, and steady ground always remains. The story returned to the beginning. The Friday afternoon when Marcus was told, "You're fired." The Monday morning when chaos shook the company. The week when truth rose and arrogance fell. It all led here, to a man at peace and a man forgotten. Narrators, speakers, and storytellers all ended the same way when they told it. Evan fired the wrong employee, and the next day his company collapsed. But Marcus's rise was proof of something greater, that the quiet ones are never truly powerless, that dignity outlasts arrogance, that respect is stronger than fear. So when you hear this story, ask yourself, are you Evan? Blind, proud, thinking you can throw people away without consequence? Or are you Marcus? Steady, patient, carrying weight without thanks, but ready to stand when the truth is called. Because in every office, every family, every corner of life, there are Evans and there are Marcuses. And in the end, karma chooses sides. Marcus's story isn't just about business. It's about all of us. About every time we were ignored. About every time someone said, "You don't matter." And it's about the sweet moment, years later, when the world finally sees. So remember this. Every wrong has its revenge. Every betrayal has its justice. Every quiet soul has its day. And sometimes, that day comes the very next morning. Evan fired the wrong employee, and the next day, his company collapsed. But Marcus rose. Marcus endured. Marcus proved that the strongest voice is often the quietest one.